Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Income is the Outcome, where we believe it's not how much you earn, it's how much you keep. I'm your host, Kristin Oakley, and I'm joined in the studio by the founder and president of the Whistler Agency, Tim Whistler. We've got a great show for you today. The title of today's show is How to Remove Your Wealth from Washington. If you're uncertain about what your potential tax liability might be in retirement and want to take steps to minimize it even now, you're not going to want to miss today's show. Tim, my friend, always so good to be here with you. How are you this week?
I'm well, Kristin. It's good to be here with you as well, and excited for today's topic to talk about taxes.
I know, right? Oh gosh. Well, I feel like, folks hear taxes, and a lot of times people just assume that's the way it is. Poor me, I've got to pay taxes. We forget that the tax code was actually written to help us pay the least amount of tax possible. That's hard to believe when we feel like we're literally being taxed to death on everything, right?
That is absolutely true.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
So we need to figure out how to stop that bleeding from happening, if you will, because there's actually many categories of income that are non-taxable that the IRS cannot touch. So we're going to be going through a lot of those today. But before we do, there's two things I think it's really important to establish as we set up today's conversation. The first is that we need to help folks understand why is it so important for them to pay attention to their potential tax bill in retirement.
If we follow the rules that we were taught during all of our years of working and deferring the taxes, basically what happens is your IRA becomes an IOU to the IRS. And when we have accounts that have that tax-deferred status, that simply means at some point down the road, when you take a withdrawal, you're going to be taxed on those dollars. And at some point down the road also, if you're not taking out enough, the IRS will graciously remind you that you need to take out what is called a required minimum distribution. So having said all that means this: you're going to have less income coming from those tax-deferred accounts. So the decisions that we make today can impact our taxes for tomorrow.
Yes, and that can follow us long into the rest of our lives, right?
Absolutely will.
But the good news is the sooner you start, and we're going to talk about a lot of those strategies on today's show, the easier it can be to help minimize that potential tax bill.
That's exactly right. And we talk through that. It's a matter of, when we come in and we have that conversation with folks and they're sharing their statements with us and we're looking at the numbers, I'm also looking at a different set that's on that column. I'm looking at the tax classification of those dollars, meaning that are those dollars tax deferred, are they taxable, or are they tax free? Because when it comes time to create an income plan for you that you need for retirement, we want to make sure we understand today what the role of the IRS will be tomorrow when you start taking income from that. So having these conversations early, I think is a good thing to do. It's a good investment of your time just to kind of see what those numbers look like. And that way we can kind of plan for the future and talk about how do we optimize those income dollars for retirement.
Absolutely. Well, the second thing I wanted to establish is that you are not a CPA, you're not an accountant, but you are a financial planner who engages in strategic, proactive tax planning for your clients. Talk about the difference and why what you do is so different.
In tax preparation, right? That's your H&R blocks, that's your CPA. They're looking at your taxes that you just paid the previous year, making sure that report is filed on time by April 15th of every year, and that's what's called tax preparation. What we look at, like Kristin said, is an overall tax planning analysis. In other words, for example, just took a phone call from a gentleman last week. He's 60. We literally spoke on his 60th birthday.
Oh, wow.
Which is kind of neat. I'm like, wow, thank you for sharing some of your time with me on your birthday,
yes.
right? Happy birthday. He brought up the fact that the majority of his assets, his investable assets, reside in that tax-deferred bucket. And he goes, it's kind of got me a little bit alarmed because now I'm 60, all of a sudden I'm thinking about things a little bit different. And I said, and that's a great thing to think about, because when I look at tax-deferred dollars that somebody is 60 years of age here in 2025, that means their current required minimum distribution date is 75. We have 15 more years that account could potentially grow in value, which is great, but it also could be a detriment, because if that account value continues to increase, the tax bill will also increase between now and the time when he has to start taking some income out. Therefore, it may behoove him, just like it may behoove you watching here today on today's show, to do some tax planning today to maybe help leverage and offset the taxes in the future.
Absolutely. Well, I know that you have created a very powerful resource that previously was really only available to existing clients of the Whistler Agency, but we want to be able to provide it to you, our viewers at home, completely complimentary. Tim, this is what you are calling your retirement tax review calculator. So why don't you explain to the viewers a little bit about what this tool is?
Absolutely. So you can see there on your screen, you can go to a website, you can scan in the QR code, and it will simply walk you through a very simple process. We're going to ask you just a couple of different details on there. You can input the account value of your tax-deferred dollars. We can also kind of incorporate, the growth rate of return. We can incorporate maybe what our tax liability might be. And then with the report that we'll generate, I think is a pretty eye-opening experience. But it's something we want to provide simply to start that conversation about, does tax planning make sense for today?
Well, let's walk through it in real time with our viewers, shall we?
Perfect, yes.
All right, so we invite you, if you've got a computer handy or your smartphone, you can do it easily on your phone as well. You can connect in one of two ways. You can visit retirementtaxreview.com or simply scan that QR code, and here is what you're going to see. It's going to take you to this basic landing page. As Tim said, you'll put in your name, your email, no strings attached, but that's how the report will be sent to you, your current age, and then the amount of money you have saved up in tax-deferred accounts. It could be a traditional 401k, 403b, traditional IRA, things of that nature. Then you'll also notice those two sliders down at the bottom. You can play around with the assumed tax liability as well as the assumed growth rate on that tax-deferred bucket of money. Then, once you click submit, two things are going to happen. First up, you're going to immediately see a side-by-side comparison on the left there between the government's tax plan for you if you do nothing versus how much less you could pay in taxes if you enact some of the tax saving strategies that we're going to be talking about throughout the rest of today's show. Then you're also going to get a 4-page report emailed to you. This is one of those pages that you'll be able to see the breakdown of your numbers. And Tim, I look at this and I know folks' jaws have to hit the floor. This example, this person had $500,000 in tax-deferred accounts. Their assumed tax liability was 22%, assumed growth rate 6%. Look at the bottom. That is over a $600,000 difference between how much tax they could pay throughout their lifetime versus how much less they could pay. And once you see those numbers side by side, you can't unsee it, right?
That's exactly right. And you look at that assumed tax liability percentage, keep in mind, we are in historically one of the lowest tax brackets of the history of the federal IRS tax code.
Yeah, it's the third lowest tax brackets we've had in the history of our country.
That's right. So therefore, you look at where we're at today, you look at tax brackets, you look at our deficit. I mean, what are taxes going to do in the future? We don't know that. We can speculate.
Right.
But when you look at that report, I think it gives you the opportunity to say, wow, okay, if I do nothing, like Kristin said, if I follow the IRS's plan, it could cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars more in taxes as opposed if I take action and create a tax planning analysis.
Right, which is why we're having a whole show called How to Remove Your Wealth from Washington,
That's right?
Well, I know that once folks see their numbers there in writing through that report, they're definitely going to want to reach out and connect with you and say, Tim, help me, how do I do this? So what would you say to someone watching who's been through that process and is ready to go, okay, I want to put together a strategic tax plan for myself?
You've taken the steps to get the analysis. That's the first step, and congratulate yourself on doing so, because far too many people just kind of ignore it. They don't like the news, they want to ignore it, so hopefully it'll go away. Folks, it's not going to go away. When you have tax-deferred dollars, the IRS will remind you that they'll graciously create a plan for you. We don't want that for you. So bring that report in, bring all the other statements in. We'll let you know kind of some documents that'll be important for our conversation. But come in, have the conversation with us. Let's take action today just to figure out what is the optimal way to create the retirement income plan in the most tax-efficient manner for the lifestyle you want to live in retirement.
Wonderful. Tim, thank you. I'm excited to continue this conversation with you. We're going to talk a lot about strategies on how you can remove your wealth from Washington throughout the rest of today's show. But as Tim said, now is the time. Pick up the phone, reach out to start your own process of getting a proactive, strategic tax plan in place for yourself and your retirement. That number to call is 888-992-7829. Or if you'd rather connect online, you can scan that QR code. That will take you to a simple landing page, ask you a few short questions, and then a member of the Whistler agency will reach out to connect with you to schedule your complimentary meeting that way as well. Stay with us. We'll be back on this conversation of how to remove your wealth from Washington right after this.
So we're based out of Peoria, Illinois. I literally just opened this office literally about a month ago, because the last 6 years I've been working out of my home office. And that was for just family reasons. My wife and I have 2 sons, and they're now starting to get to that age where they're about ready to fly the coop. So it's just good to be with them for these last few years. We are on the main level of a 3-story professional office building. So as soon as they enter through the large double doors, they immediately turn to their left, and there's the entrance to the Whistler agency. So we're very easily accessible for people, right off the street. You park in the parking lot, walk the sidewalk, you come in the door, and you're right there. And when they come in, there'll be a couple little seats there in the small little entryway, if you will. Most people aren't really waiting to get to me. I'm not like a doctor's office or anything like that. But then we've got a little receptionist area, and then I walk them through our conference room. The conference room table is actually a dining room table for my grandmother. I just bring a little bit of the element of family in my practice, and just kind of have our conversation right there. When interest rates are low, you might be able to refinance your home, your car, and even your credit cards. Yet when interest rates go up, it may make sense to refinance your retirement. Higher interest rates could provide income opportunities you may not be aware of. What works for your portfolio during low interest rates may not work for you when interest rates are high. Call today for your complimentary Refi Your Retirement review.
Welcome back to Income is the Outcome. I'm Kristin Oakley here with Tim Whistler, founder and president of the Whistler Agency. And today we are discussing how to remove your wealth from Washington. If you're just tuning in and joining us, we just shared an awesome resource that's available to you completely free. We're going to put it up here on the screen for you again. We invite you during the show, take out your smartphone, visit the site, retirementtaxreview.com. You can click on that QR code. That will take you to the site as well. You're going to be able to put in some basic information and then see the difference between how much you could potentially pay in taxes over your lifetime versus how much less you could pay in tax if you enact some of these tax saving strategies we're going to spend the rest of today's show talking about. But I do just want to show again real quick this image here of the report. This is one page of this 4-page report that will be emailed to you after you use this awesome tool, so you can see the side-by-side comparison. And Tim, this is why we're going to spend the rest of today's show. If you look at those bottom lines there, the difference between what the government's tax plan is for this person versus how much less they could pay in tax, that's a huge difference.
Oh, it's significant. And I think that's why this report can be so powerful, because I've received feedback from folks who have already used the calculator and they brought that report in. They're just like, I had no idea. No, and that's okay. How could you know that, right? You just simply followed the rules. You deferred the taxes by building up a traditional IRA, a pre-tax 401k. Now we have the report. Okay, now the rubber hits the road.
Right. Yeah.
Now what do we do with these numbers? And this is why it's so critical to, number one, take that first step, get your own report, and then we put the plan in action after that.
Absolutely. Well, again, when you see those numbers, you can't unsee them. And this is why folks are going to want to know how to remove their wealth from Washington, right? So
That's right.
We've got a list of different types of non-taxable income that the IRS cannot touch. We're going to be going through some of these different strategies. So first up here on our list, we're going to get through as many of these as we can, right?
Absolutely.
But first off, let's talk about Roth IRA income.
Yes. So the Roth IRA is funded with after-tax dollars. And it can be funded a couple different ways. We're going to talk about the first one here first, where you contribute to your Roth IRA. And that simply means as long as you have earned income that is taxable, that's the whole point of earned income, it's taxable, you can contribute up to a certain dollar amount. So under current law, if you're less than 50, you can put in $7,000 a year into your Roth IRA. If you're 50 or older, the government allows you to catch up with an additional $1,000, so therefore you could put $8,000 a year into your own Roth IRA. Okay? So then, as time goes on, now you come into retirement, you've got your Roth IRA account. Unlike the tax-deferred account, the IRS plays no role when you start taking distributions from it because it comes out tax-free. Now, the contributions are available tax-free because of the fact you've already paid taxes on them. But if we put that Roth IRA into a vehicle that can grow in value, those gains can also come out tax-free as long as we meet two different criteria. Number one, we have to be at least 59 and a half. Don't forget about that half in there. And also the Roth IRA, number two, has to be at least 5 years old for you to also take out the gains from the Roth IRA contributions.
Right.
But it's a beautiful complement to an overall income plan. Let's leverage some after-tax dollars today to create some tax-free dollars for tomorrow.
Awesome. Great job describing Roth IRA contributions. Let's now talk about Roth IRA conversions, because as we think about that report that you'll receive from retirementtaxreview.com, this is one of the biggest strategies that you're able to use to help move money from always being taxed to never again being taxed. So walk us through how that process works.
So again, it all starts with the conversation, because just like I've mentioned this to everybody on the show before, being such a joy of being a part of that Ed Slott Elite IRA Advisor Group. We talk about this consistently every workshop. And in fact, it's a document that I have here in front of me that we share with folks. To convert or not to convert in 5 easy steps. It's not for everybody. But when you have a report similar to the one that they just showed on the screen, that'll probably grab our attention.
Right.
And therefore it should culminate into continuing the conversation. So a Roth conversion allows us, like Kristin said, to begin the process of taking dollars out of that forever taxed bucket and moving them into the never taxed bucket. So how do we do that? Well, unfortunately, the conduit between those two buckets is the IRS. If we take a certain dollar amount out of that forever taxed bucket and want to convert it to the Roth, for example, we have to pay taxes on that conversion. Now, we could spend a month in shows just talking about Roth conversions, so we'll hit at a high level. It's important for us to understand that when you take those taxes out, that counts as income for that year. So we want to make sure that we understand that that might change our tax rate, although it may not change the tax bracket. We don't know. If we're over 65, it could impact your Medicare premiums. That's called IRMA. Income-related monthly adjusted amount. So there's a lot of details that goes into the Roth conversion process. Therefore, I think it's so important for us to look at the details, look at the timeline involved to determine whether or not a conversion makes sense or not.
Right.
But from the standpoint, now at least we have a plan.
Yes.
Now we understand this is our plan. Are we going to leave the dollars in the forever tax bucket and just pay as we go? Or maybe do some conversions now, create that after-tax bucket of money, that tax-free bucket of money, because also, too, I didn't mention this before, but I wanted to save it for this point.
Yeah.
When you have tax-deferred dollars and you have what's called a required minimum distribution, guess what does not involve in a Roth IRA? You do not have to take distributions out of it because the government has already received their tax revenue from it, so therefore you don't have to take any withdrawals from a Roth IRA. But when you do, it's all tax-free.
Yeah, and that's such a beautiful thing. And I think about, too, taking it a step further for folks who are wanting to pass on a legacy to their loved ones. Let's talk about the difference between passing on that traditional IRA, that tax-deferred account, versus a Roth IRA. Yeah,
it can get really complicated because I like to remind everybody that your IRA account is yours. You own it, right? The IRS is your silent partner until you start taking withdrawals.
Right.
Now they become not so silent, okay? So in the scenario of husband and wife, husband has a traditional IRA, he passes away. His wife can now become the primary owner of his IRA. Therefore, she just basically replaces his name with her name. So now it's her IRA, right? Now the rules can possibly still apply. We won't go into details as far as, are we going to do a rollover? Are we going to do an inherited IRA? That's a whole different set of details. But now all of a sudden, you talk about going from mom and dad to the kiddos. A traditional IRA is still tax deferred. Just because the IRA owner passes away does not mean that the IRS magically disappears. They will latch themselves right onto that tax deferred account, and now it's involved, now how it's involved with the next generation is that the current laws changed with the recent passing of legislation called the Secure Act. And then they modified it with the Secure Act 2.0. Here's what I mean by that. If you're already taking required minimum distributions from your IRA account, and now your kiddos inherit it, they are now going to continue to take RMDs, required minimum distributions, from that IRA account just like you were, and the entire account has to be zero in 10 years. Why do they do that? They mean the IRS, because they want their tax revenue.
Right. Yep.
So therefore, when we think about a legacy plan for the kids, and like I mentioned before, we look at dollars through the lenses of the IRS. Tax-deferred, taxable, tax-free. We just want to make sure that we understand that if you leave tax-deferred dollars behind to a non-spouse beneficiary, those beneficiaries now have to abide by IRS rules, as opposed to leaving dollars behind in a Roth IRA. again, those dollars are all tax-free.
Right.
Therefore, it doesn't possibly put them into a higher tax bracket when they receive an inheritance.
Yes, and that can be a game changer for folks, for sure.
Definitely.
You know, I think back to the story you shared of the gentleman who called you last week, who it was his 60th birthday, and he called you, and because of his age, he won't reach that RMD, that required minimum distribution age, until age 75. And you were telling him, this is a really good thing you're calling me now, because we've got 15 years to start doing these Roth conversions and put this into place. And it can be very complicated. Right. We kind of recommend don't try this at home, right? Because there's so many ways it could go wrong if they're not done correctly. It's
exactly right. I think that report is the best thing to start. I think it just gives us an idea. But again, trying this at home, I mean, you certainly can, but there's a lot of traps and pitfalls. That are waiting around the corner for us. And that's why, again, I keep going back to that. Being a part of a group that focuses on IRA accounts to help you successfully navigate that is important, because, you know, he attained what I call that sweet spot. When we get to that age of 59 and a half, up until your RMD age, that is really the ideal time to really start considering some tax planning. Does it make sense? Do we, you know, if somebody wants to retire early, like say, for example, what I mean by early is maybe they're going to retire before their full retirement age of Social Security. Okay. Does it make sense to defer Social Security while we're doing some tax planning? Possibly, because up to 85% of your Social Security benefits can be taxed. So if you turn on Social Security and do some tax planning, guess what you're possibly doing? It might be some counterproductive type of an environment that maybe we don't really want to do. So we want to talk through that, again, just to see if it makes sense on how to optimize those assets and how to create the most tax-efficient income stream. Right. Well, and again, that's why this report that we're offering to folks today, this is completely complimentary, free for you to use, and it's really the first step of this process. We invite you to visit retirementtaxreview.com. You can click that QR code. That will take you to this amazing tool where you can actually see what your potential tax liability might be in retirement. And once you see those numbers, we're confident you're going to want to reach out to Tim and the team of the Whistler Agency to see what strategies you can put into place to start lowering your tax bill even now. So we invite you to pick up the phone, call the number you see on the bottom of your screen to schedule your very own complimentary written financial plan. Of course, as part of that, this tax analysis will be a huge piece of what you can discuss. That number to call is 888-992-7829, or you're welcome to scan that QR code, and that will get you connected to schedule your complimentary meeting that way as well. We've got more strategies on helping you remove your wealth from Washington. Stay with us.
When was the last time you saw your financial professional? Are you getting the most out of the strategy that was created for you? Although you've done a great job finding someone to help plan for your future, are you 100% sure that you were given the right strategy? We can help answer these questions and more with a complimentary second opinion evaluation. We will take a look at what you have in place and then help determine if you're well positioned to get the most out of your future retirement income. In the event that it is not, we can help by making suggestions and showing you how to get on the right path. You wouldn't get just one opinion when it comes to a major health decision, so why would you treat your most important financial decision with such disregard? Call today for your no-cost, no-obligation second opinion evaluation to see if you're getting the most out of your retirement income plan.
Did you know your retirement isn't entirely yours? That's right. Your traditional 401k, IRA, or pension is actually shared with the IRS. And when it's time to withdraw, they'll be waiting for their cut in taxes. To find out how much you may owe, try our easy-to-use tax calculator. Just scan the QR code or visit retirementtaxreview.com.
Welcome back to Income is the Outcome, where today we're discussing how to remove your wealth from Washington. And we're going through several different types of income that the IRS cannot touch, and some strategies to help you potentially lower your tax bill both now and in retirement. If you're just joining us, we do invite you to take out your phone and visit this key site. This is a free tool and resource for you to use to see what your potential tax bill might be in retirement, retirementtaxreview.com. You can also scan that QR code. That will take you directly to the tool, and it will show you your numbers. You're actually going to get a 4-page report emailed to you. And Tim, we have said once people see those numbers, they're definitely going to want to have this strategic tax plan put in place for them.
I certainly hope so. It certainly behooves them to at least have the conversation, run the numbers, and see how we can, again, best leverage those assets that they worked for decades to build to create the least amount of tax liability in retirement.
Yeah. Well, in the remaining minutes we have of today's show, let's go through some other ways that folks can lower their tax liability. First up, financial gifts.
Yep, financial gifts. So again, it changes year to year, but for 2025, a person can give up to $19,000 to another person without that being some type of a tax, event, tax plan type of thing. So that's one way that clients are doing that. Again, like for example, if you're married, husband and wife can each give $19,000 to friends, family, or anyone and not be taxed. So that's kind of a nice little benefit because the recipients won't be taxed either.
Right.
So sometimes if we're dealing kind of with our high net worth clients, and they've got a very specific idea in mind, or kind of they want to leave some dollars behind for the kids, they might want to start maybe doing that before it actually becomes a legacy plan.
Right, for sure. And then we have qualified charitable distributions, QCDs. That's another huge strategy.
It is, and those are for the folks of, you don't really have to wait until your RMD age. You actually can start executing the qualified charitable distributions as early as 70 and a half. But basically what that means for you is that when you have an RMD amount that's due to the IRS, if you don't want to take that as a taxable income situation, you can send those RMD dollars onto a non-for-profit called a qualified charitable entity and fulfill your RMD, but it doesn't create your tax income. And one of our clients did that they have a daughter who's on the mission field, and their RMD was due for that calendar year. So instead of them bringing the income in and paying taxes on it, they had that RMD go directly to the mission board as a QCD. So it's another way to maybe lower your tax liability, but yet still fulfilling your required minimum distribution.
For sure. Well, I know we're coming up to the end of today's show, but we have to talk briefly about 7702 plans. What do you want to say about that strategy?
Again, 7702 is basically the IRS code that allows you to utilize the cash value advantages inside of a life insurance policy. And sometimes at this time of our life, we're thinking, I don't need life insurance anymore. And we don't maybe need life insurance for the death benefit per se, but the cash value benefit inside of a life insurance, a permanent life insurance policy, can really reap benefits, especially for this time of year, as we're talking through tax planning, how to create income that's not taxable. It all kind of comes into play. It's not a one-size-fits-all.
Right.
It's one of the things where we kind of elaborate on a case-by-case basis, but again, it's something for us to consider as we go through that tax-efficient withdrawal strategy.
Well, I'm so excited for more folks to get to connect with you as a result of today's show, and by visiting this tax tool, then bringing in that report and coming in and saying, Tim, put together this plan for me, right?
Let's do that. Let's make the phone call today. Let's get on the calendar, and you've watched the entire show. Take the next step, pick up the phone, and get on our calendar. Let's get this tax analysis in your hands and start creating the retirement income plan for your retirement years.
Wonderful. Tim, thank you so much. To our viewers at home, that number to call is 888-992-7829. Tim would love to walk you through how you can remove your wealth from Washington, and it starts with you picking up the phone and making that important phone call. Be safe, be happy, be blessed, and we look forward to being back with you next time here on Income is the Outcome.